Buenas noches, Hamza. My name is Felix Sablan, and I'm here with the write-in candidate for AG, Mr. Peter Santos.
Alpha Day, everyone.
And we're here to just have a conversation, a candid conversation about his position, his platform, why he's running, and just to have a conversation that maybe relate to what you are hoping to understand. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Felix, for doing this with me. I know you're here on Guam only for a short period of time on business and a little bit of pleasure, but I thank you for taking the time out, offering me this opportunity for us to talk and get my message out and why I am running as a write-in candidate for the Attorney General.
Yeah, I thought it was important that we see an option that makes sense, and to hear your story. Guam boy, born and raised in Agate, still has his roots firmly intact, and I think there's a lot of value to making sure that this office has doesn't forget where their priorities and their focus needs to be. So I'm happy to support.
Thank you.
Yeah, when I heard that you were running, I was excited to see you put your name in the hat. Mainly because my exposure to you was knowing that you've always been a fighter. You've always been somebody that had the utmost integrity and the cultural lens through which problems need to be solved. And so my desired question here is, what are the challenges that you're really kind of pinpointing that you're going to have to, that you know that you're going to have to fight, and why you're going to fight those fights?
Well, the first challenge and the biggest challenge, of course, is in crime. Prosecution right now is on life support. And we're seeing what we're seeing now because there are not enough prosecutors, and the prosecutors that are there are fresh out of law school, most of them are not from Guam, so they don't understand the nuances and the issues that we experience here on Guam. And they don't understand basic criminal justice to begin with, right? The biggest challenge is getting a team back, because the reason why we got to this place is because there was a lack of leadership and also a very toxic environment that was created under this Attorney General. And right now, Douglas Moylan and Levin Camacho are the two named candidates on the ballot. The ironic thing is both of them had the same dismal track record with prosecution. Both of them drove away prosecutors, and both of them it didn't have to be this way under both of them. But what it is, for Doug, it was a personality problem, and for Levin, it's a lack of experience. So Levin was just a private practitioner for 13 years, and then he became the Attorney General. So there's no institutional knowledge, there's no fighting in the trenches, rising through the ranks. And so, unfortunately, and I believe Levin is a great guy. We used to go out and have drinks and have lunch. We had lunch a couple of times together, right? Yeah. So he's a great guy. He's an awesome guy, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have what it takes to lead an organization of around 250 people with about 55 lawyers, right? So that experience and development and training was just lacking. So that's why, and a lot of people don't get to see behind the curtain, right? And don't get to see what's happening. But you don't have to take my word for it. You can ask anyone that works at the court. You can ask any of the judges, if you know a judge. You can ask any of the defense bar. You can ask all the prosecutors, all the former prosecutors that are still here on Guam. You can ask anyone in law enforcement. You can ask anyone at the Department of Corrections. And the issue is, out of all the components of the criminal justice system, so you have law enforcement, you have prosecution, you have the courts, you have corrections, you have the defense bar. All different components of the criminal justice system is working and functional, except for prosecution. Prosecution is in intensive care for all intents and purposes. And it's causing a huge backlog. It's causing a lot of problems across the board when prosecutors come to court unprepared and unskilled. And judges are getting frustrated and furious at prosecution. And, they've been calling the AG out on this. And so the first thing is to rebuild the team. Rebuild a stable of prosecutors that are competent, that are skilled, and then, go in and develop them to be the prosecutors that we need them to be, and to service Guam. And that's why we are seeing the ripple effect of perpetrators, and they're innocent until proven guilty, but they're the ones that have committed crimes, so there's no other label but to say criminals, right? So we see perpetrators, criminals, just being allowed to do whatever they do without being held accountable, to do whatever they do with impunity, basically. So the statistics that we are seeing on Guam right now is kind of, you have to look at it from an educated point of view. It's not that we have more criminals on Guam, but it's just that these criminals are allowed to rack and stack multiple cases. So some individuals have 10, 12 cases that are still pending because they haven't been prosecuted on their very first case. Because prosecution is just non-functional at this point.
So tell me, for 10 Maria down the street, or for a working mother or a family that may find their way in the crosshairs of the law, how does a weak prosecution actually affect their lives?
Well, first and foremost, when someone gets arrested for committing a violent crime, they can be held until their trial. However, the judges have to release them if prosecution doesn't come to court with the right amount of information and with good arguments. And so we don't have prosecution performing that function at this time. And I spoke with victims advocates reaching out, Vero, and I asked them, what do they need from the Attorney General's office? And they said, really, what we need is competent prosecution, right? Because they can have all the resources they need and want.
Right.
But when a abuser goes to court and is just released, then now they're scrambling to find a place for the victims to go and hide. They're scrambling to make sure that they are kept safe. Because when someone is released because a case is dismissed, right, or because the prosecution didn't argue strongly enough, then there's either little or no conditions put on them. And so that's why we have these individuals with 5, 6, 12 cases pending, right, because they're not being prosecuted. And that's the reality that we're facing on Guam right now.
Wow. And so tell me, I mean, for those in the audience that don't know your background, when you say practice or experience, something that you really do come with. Tell the audience a little bit about your background, why you feel that background is going to be beautifully prepares you to execute this office with really great outcomes.
So I started out my public service career as a police officer. I was a police officer in the Guam Police Department. I have done all kinds of investigations, homicides, rapes, robberies. So I'm able to look at investigations and I'm able to see and read between the lines.
Sure.
And I'm able to shore up any investigations that need to be shored up prior to trial. The other two candidates don't have that experience. I'm also the only one that's been a prosecutor. And so, again, I know what it takes. Being a law enforcement officer helped me tremendously when I was a prosecutor. Being a prosecutor is going to help me tremendously if and when I'm the Attorney General. The other two don't have that. The third thing that I have that the other two don't have is I've been a magistrate. So I know what's supposed to, happen when someone comes for pretrial release or pretrial confinement. So I will train the prosecutors, and it's not that difficult. It's not rocket science.
Right.
But the problem is the current Attorney General has his head buried in the sand, and he's not interested or involved in prosecution. The only time he says that prosecution is a priority is right prior to the election. I've worked under the current Attorney General. I've seen how he just doesn't really make prosecution of crimes a priority. The only thing that he ever wanted to know from prosecution while I was there, he wanted us to fill out a press release after every trial. And if we won the trial, then they would release the press release. If we lost the trial, the press release would get buried. So that's what I remember. So instead of asking the prosecutors, okay, what do you need for us to help you be successful? Or even better, as the Attorney General, instead of being the one to mentor and develop the prosecutors, he just basically was off chasing windmills, off doing lawsuits and getting involved in the American Samoa case, things like that. Those were his priorities, at least from where I sat and what I could see. And crime and prosecution was at the very bottom of his priorities. But only now that it's election time that he wants to emphasize that crime is his number one priority. But it really wasn't.
So come January 1st, when Peter Santos is AG, what are the resources that you're really going to shoot for, ask for? What is the first couple of actions that you're going to be doing?
So, to be quite brutally honest, it's not a money issue. As a matter of fact, there have been lapses. There have been unused money in the Attorney General's office. Why? Because we just don't have the prosecutors to pay. So you're going to have a lapse in funds because you're authorized 25 prosecutors, but you only really have a dozen, right? And out of those dozen, only 2 are really qualified. And out of those dozen, the majority of them are brand new, fresh out of law school. And so your personnel costs for prosecution will be extremely low. So we don't really need money. What we need, and we don't just need warm bodies, we need competent people, competent prosecutors. Both Douglas Moylan and Levin Camacho have taken, during their terms, child support attorneys, civil attorneys, and make them prosecute. Well, we see the outcome.
Right.
So let me tell you something that is not going to be in an AG press release. In the last month, there have been 8 acquittals, 8 cases that went to trial. And that's not counting all the dismissals that are happening at the charging level and on the eve of trial because there's just not enough prosecutors to prosecute. Okay? You're not also going to hear about how, at where I work, we managed to hire within the last month 2 new off-island attorneys. But nobody wants to go to the AG's office. As a matter of fact, the opposite has occurred at the AG's office. There is a guy who was born and raised on Guam, just got admitted to the Guam bar. He went to be a prosecutor in Washington State, not on Guam. Why? Why is that? Okay? And then there are some prosecutors that are on the roster, but they're only there on paper. And 2 of them either have just submitted or are about to submit their resignation because they're going to stay on active duty or they've accepted jobs somewhere else. So it's not a money issue, right? It's a recruitment issue. It's a retention issue. I myself, when I was a prosecutor, brought in 6 prosecutors under Elizabeth Barrett Anderson. And they came over under my promises that they're going to have a good, healthy work environment. They're all gone now because they actually experienced the opposite under Levin Camacho.
So I'm hearing really it's recruitment, but also it's building your bench, building the competence of the prosecution,
Right.
so that Guam's people are protected.
Correct. You know, the way I analogize it is what Doug and Levin has been doing by taking other types of attorney and forcing them. Now, they're not willing to do this. They're not volunteering to do this.
Yeah.
They're being told to do this, forcing them to prosecute. It's like saying, you know what, dentist, we have an emergency and we need someone that needs a triple bypass heart surgery, open heart surgery. So since you're a doctor, right, can you step over here to the OR real quick and perform this heart surgery? What's going to happen? The patient's going to die, right? And so that's what's happening on Guam, is we're losing very serious criminal trials because we're using the wrong types of attorneys and we're using new attorneys that never, you know, it's a borderline ethical violation for the AG to allow this to occur.
Right. So talk about your when it comes to your platform, right? What do most people not understand about how you're going to reform it?
Okay, so first of all, the number one thing is bring competence back to the office.
Okay.
And so I like to try to make the people understand this. Every AG has their area of emphasis. We saw Alicia Limtiaco.
Right.
Her area of emphasis was human trafficking. We saw Douglas Moylan. His area of emphasis was persecuting his political enemies, right? He used the office, he abused the office to go after his political enemies, right? And so, under Levin Camacho, his area of emphasis or his platform was lawsuits. And his lowest priority was crime. The other thing I could say about Levin is he seems to be protecting his financial backers, right? The difference between me and the other two guys is I don't have any big business interests. I don't have any family big business, right? And so nobody will be treated with special treatment if Peter Santos is the Attorney General. Everybody is open game. But where there's smoke, there's fire. If it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, or squawks like a duck, then you know. And so what we haven't seen out of Levin Camacho is any white collar prosecutions. All the things that the public auditor has handed to him on a silver platter has been thrown in the trash. There's been no action. So his legacy, to me at least, the way I see it, is he's going to be the Attorney General that failed to act, that failed to prosecute, that failed to do his duties, right?
So just wrapping that up, it's really focusing on prosecution and mitigating crime, right? Lowering crime. The moral imperative, making sure that you build that integrity back into the office. And then last is just taking action on the things that matter, right? And it sounds like that was kind of the culmination of the three.
Right, but if anyone wants to know what my area of emphasis would be, it's vulnerable victims. So,
There you go.
children and manamko. Even when I was a law enforcement officer, it affected me.
Right.
I've seen it. I've seen it growing up. I've seen it. It's happened to me, right? So, to me, that is an area that deserves the most protection.
Right.
Because these are folks who cannot defend themselves. We're talking about little children, right? And so, Felix, I don't go out and attend all the big fancy galas and all that, right? What I have done and this, people can fact check me on this and people can verify what I've done. What I have done is I do things sort of under the radar and behind the scenes. When I was a prosecutor and even now as a defense attorney, I've done things like clothing drives and food drives, right? And donated those things. I've done it for DOC, I've done it for the different charities here, I've done it for the victims, right? There's a big silent witness ceremony that goes on every year, right? I've never attended it, but I was the one who made and donated the plaques for each and every one of those victims, okay? Also, when I first came back to Guam from the States, I found out because of my prior time in the Guam Police Department, I had 600 hours of sick leave. So I said, whoa, I don't need all this. So I opened it up without anyone asking. I sent out a mass email. Who needs sick leave? Just fill out your form and I'll give you all my sick leave. And so, of course, there's a limit I can donate to each individual. But all told, I donated 480 hours of sick leave, right? And people are like, well, why are you doing that? Because you can use that towards your retirement. Well, it's there. People need it now. And so that's the kind of, under the radar kind of things that I do. And I'm not saying that to promote myself, but I'm trying to get elected and I want people to understand who I am and the way I work, right? So I'm not all about the fancy, glitzy, big billboards, full page ads in the newspaper, or even, an army of unwitting cheerleaders and self-interested supporters, right? When I go out and I campaign, Felix, there's nobody with me. It's just me by myself, because I want the constituent to be able to face me, talk to me, and ask me about my ideas, about why I want to serve. I don't have proxies to go out and hand out shiny trifolds, right? It's just me. I'm the only one that's out there pounding the pavement. I go to the flea markets, I go to the night markets, I go to the pocket meetings, and you'll never see me with anybody else. It's only me.
Right. So, and that's one thing that I've always respected about you. Even in our interactions back in the mainland, you were somebody that was personable, that was always trying to have that moral imperative, make sure that you're always in the right, like making sure that you're doing that making things right. Always. And I think one of the things that people want to understand, and this is maybe my curiosity, it's just a coffee chat, and it's a little bit loud, so hopefully that's working, is more on like what's driving you. What is the thing, agnostic of the office, right? What's driving Peter Santos?
So, as a young child, I grew up very poor. I was born into a tin shack with no indoor plumbing. I even spent one summer in a station wagon, homeless, with my mom and my two siblings, right? And so, throughout my life experience, I have always been blessed with other people who have stepped up and who have assisted us along the way. Right. And even in my professional career, there's always been mentors who have grabbed me by the hand and said, hey boy, let me show you the way. Let me show you the right way to do things. And that's the only reason why I ever got a college education and even a law degree. It's because other people said, you're doing good, but work on yourself, improve yourself, and you can serve, more. So I've always been trying to self-improve so that I could be a better servant to the community, but it's also about giving back. Because all those people that took me by the hand, all those people that, sorry,
it's okay,
that gave us food to eat, I owe it to give back. Yeah. So that's why I do what I do. And I know, you know, when I met you and we interacted, I sensed that in you as well. You know, and sorry,
It's okay.
but that's why I do this, because I care about our people.
That's right. And I think that comes out. It comes out very clear, because, and it's a lever, right? This office is a lever to give that and amplify that service back. And I think the people need to know that part of you, because you are more than just what you're running for, and I think that's meaningful.
I never wanted to be in the limelight. I never sought position, you know. I can't stand back and see what's going on and allow it to continue, because it's wrong.
Right.
It's very wrong.
Right.
Someone's got to step up and do the right thing.
Right.
Sorry.
It's good, man. I think that's the type of leaders we need, not just in this office. And I can speak for everyone that may either from abroad, or we want the best for our island, but we cannot forget why they are in service. They're in service for the betterment of our people, right? So thank you for sharing that. And that's what I wanted to hear, because you've had a drive your whole, like, I've watched you, right? There's something driving you, and I think the people need to hear that. They really do. So thanks for sharing that.
Thank you for helping me with this.
Of course.
And I appreciate everything that you do for our people, either here or abroad.
I typically don't do these kind of things, and I think I've told you this before. Like I don't, but you know, I care deeply about this island, about our people, and about our future, and I feel like there's that. We need leaders that have not just a passion for doing good, but that long-term vision of what good looks like, and can actually make it happen. And I believe you, man. I really do. And that's why I'm here doing it today. So it's not, you know, it's not a political, you know, red versus white. It really comes down to, do we have the right representation in the right places to do the right thing? And I believe that you have.
Thank you. And I want to say, you know, I don't believe that Doug and Levin are intentionally trying to harm Guam. I don't believe that at all. But I've seen the results of their approach, put it that way. And it is harmful to Guam. It is dangerous. And me being on the inside and me seeing what's wrong, I have to step up. And that's the whole reason why I'm doing this. For me, for you, for our family, for our friends, for our entire island, our community, you know. And it goes beyond our shores, because one thing I know about Guam is there's a lot of people that are from Guam, Chamorro or not, that Guam will always be their home, and they have people here that they love and they care about. And so it affects a lot of people, not just our people here on Guam. It affects everyone everywhere that has any connection to this island.
Right. And that's why it's important. I know there's a if you don't understand if you don't live here, but really the diaspora really are caring for their families here. They really, and so I think there's a validity to that. I wanted to get in, if you want to get out of character, just because I think you have if you wanted to kind of have a different option for that as well. That was beautiful, by the way. That's real. But I'm not sure if that's where, if you want to have a second option to do that part, if you want. So
No,
that
it's always going to be that way.
okay, good. That's good. Actually, so it's good, and I think, man, I wish I was here voting. But going back, it was good. That was just getting out of character for a second. What else is inside of you that needs to be said?
Give me a minute.
Sure.
I just think that as an island, we need to be realistic, and we need to face the truth if we're gonna fix the problems that we have. And I have always tried to live truthfully. And it hurts when I see people lie to our people and not doing their duty or their job because of prestige or because of ego or because of power. You know, I've worked in so many different places, and I've seen how things could be better. I've seen how things are bad. So I know what bad looks like, I know what good looks like, I know what better looks like. And on Guam, we can be doing so much better. We really can. But we have to face reality, and we have to be honest with ourselves.
You know, I see your tears. These are, tears of frustration, and like, to me, that's a true sign of someone who's self-aware, and who's someone who wants to be authentic in their space, and who really, you feel this, and I think that's a difference. But again, don't take that as weak, no, because there is a fierce if the fierceness in having that emotional backing to pursue, to do the right thing. Because right now, I'm moved to, like, this is real you. This is the real Peter Santos.
I'm invested in this island.
Right.
I left in 2001 with the sole intent and purpose of improving myself so that I can come back and be a better servant. And this is where this path is taking me down. Right. It's never been about position or power or prestige or possessions, right? It's always been about service, about compassion, about humility, about understanding and doing the right thing, and not just sitting back and waiting for others to do the right thing. It's about taking action and being the solution, being part of the solution, right? And so that's what drives me. And I thank you for having this conversation with me, because I know we've had many conversations in the past, and I see the same thing, coming from you, that you are driven. You're a driven individual. You have been blessed, just like I have been blessed to be a part of this culture and this community. Right. And I thank you for doing all that you do to help promote and perpetuate, the Guam culture, the Chamorro culture. And when I met you and others like you, it really made me feel good inside that there are people like you and others, and if I can count myself in that group, that stand up and take action and push us forward and do the right thing. So I appreciate you. I appreciate your time.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the time. I am very honored to have this conversation with you. Truly, we haven't had this long of a conversation in ever, right? So
Right.
this is really also for me to get to know, you as the person, and also the leader going into the role. So thanks for the time too as well. I appreciate you as well.
Thank you so much.